I'm Ross Malcolm Boyd. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about 6 chords. You may have already learned the C6 chord, which is just all your strings played open, like so. But there are other 6 chords that we can play, and if you've ever looked at a ukulele chord chart, you've probably noticed that there's more than one way to play different chords. We're going to be focusing on just one way to play 6 chords. All right, first off, I'm going to grab a pillow, and I'm going to put it on my lap. I don't think you can quite see right now, but I'm doing that for 2 different reasons. Reason number 1 is so that the ukulele will be up a little bit higher in the shot, so you can see the neck of the ukulele a little bit better. The other reason is I'm not wearing a strap, and I kind of don't feel like having to hold the ukulele up against my body in that traditional fashion. So I'm using the pillow in my lap to just raise the body of the ukulele up a little bit so it's closer to my chest up here. So it's a little ook hack for you. Okay, so 6 chords. We're going to start off with our C6 chord. Again, you may remember C6 as being all of your strings played open, like so. Now, I can use my index finger to strum those strings. I could use my thumb to strum those strings. If I had a pick and I felt like using a pick, I could use a pick to strum those strings. If Squeak wanted to join us, she would probably use her paws to strum those strings open. And notice I'm doing a downstroke on those when I play those strings. I could do an upstroke, but I wanna do downstrokes for this video. Just like that. Okay, so how do we change that chord? Well, that's where we need to use our left hand to push down on some of these frets over here. Now, I want to keep the same chord shape as that C6, okay? Now, in order to change the chord, I have to start holding down these strings over here, and to maintain that 6 chord shape that we're looking at here, I'm just going to have to hold down all of the strings on any given fret. So if I hold down all of those strings on the 2nd fret, so again, that's just one finger pushing down on all of my strings across the 2nd fret. That gives me a D6 chord. C6 is open. D6 is all the strings on the 2nd fret. C6, D6. So you probably notice it has a very similar sound, right? It has the same qualities as the C6 chord, except it's a little bit higher. Now, it's going to take a little bit of strength in your index finger to hold down all of those strings all at once. And it's also going to mean good placement of your thumb on the back of the neck. So we want to make sure that your thumb is placed like centered on the back of the neck there. So you're kind of creating like this pinching shape between those 2 fingers. Sometimes you might use a 2nd finger to help support the initial finger. So I've got my index finger pushed down across all of those strings. And if I needed a little extra help, my middle finger could support that by pushing down as well, kind of, relieving a little bit of the burden off of your index finger. The other thing that you're probably going to notice is as you're trying to hold this down, you're going to be squeezing your hand really, really tight, and that can tire your hand out quite a bit. So the other thing that I like to do is doing this little squeeze exercise. So I'm not even going to play the chord. I'm just going to put my fingers in position, and I'm going to squeeze down on those notes, and then relax. And then squeeze down those notes, and then relax. So again, I'm not playing. I'm just putting my fingers in position, squeeze, and relax. Squeeze, and relax. Because the reality is we don't want to push down on those strings any more than we need to. Once we're getting all those notes out, then we're good to go. If we keep squeezing harder, we might pull the notes out of tune, but even more so, we're just going to tire out our hand, and you're going to get cramps, and it's not going to be fun. So developing the strength in your fingers is going to be super important, but also not tiring yourself out. One other trick that I use when I'm barring strings, that's what we call when we're using one finger to cover up multiple strings like that. When I'm barring, with my index finger in particular, sometimes your strings can get kind of like lost in the fleshy part of your finger. So if I'm using the flat of my finger here, I've got these joints, and like the pads of my finger are kind of squishy, right? Whereas the side of my finger here, the side that's kind of by my thumb, is more bony. I'm going to get more direct contact with the strings if I kind of lean into the bonier side of my finger. So I'm going to do an exaggerated example. You're not going to have to move your hand this much, but just so you can kind of see what I'm doing. If I'm pushing down with my index finger on the 2nd fret, I'm kind of like leaning my finger this way. Kind of leaning like that. Again, this is a dramatic motion. I don't want to actually move my fingers all out like this. I'm just doing that to illustrate that I'm just kind of leaning the weight of my finger to the side. So I'm not just pushing straight down with the flat of my finger, but I'm leaning to the side a little bit. Just easing it over that way a little bit. Depending on the chord, there are times where I might lean to the other side of my finger, but kind of listen to your hand, listen to what your hand is doing. Everybody's got, something different going on with your hands. Some folks might have arthritis. Some folks, might have bend in their finger maybe, or something like that. I've seen some folks with some odd bends in their finger. And for those folks, it might mean a little bit of kind of maneuvering a little bit differently, trying to lean a different way, all while being comfortable with your own body. So that's going to be super, super important. So a lot of the techniques that I teach are, general across the board, pretty good, but depending on who you are and what shape you are, you might need to modify those positions a little bit, and that's totally fine. Okay, so we have our C6 chord, and we have our D6 chord. Now you might have already figured this out, but we can start moving this shape around, and wherever we put our finger, we'll get a 6 chord. So for instance, I'm on the 2nd fret now. If I move to the 4th fret, that is an E6 chord. So I've got my D6, E6. 2nd fret is D6. 4th fret is E6. And of course, C6 is open, like that. So wherever I put my finger, if I'm barring across all of those strings, I'm getting a 6 chord. The name is just going to be dependent on where your finger is. So again, we've got C6, D6, E6. 5th fret. Frets are getting smaller up here, so it's going to be a little bit trickier to get all of your strings nice and clear the farther up we go. Let's take a look at some of the less common chords, at least less common at the beginning. The 3rd fret, for instance, would be an E flat 6 chord. And the 1st fret would be a D flat 6 chord. So we can just kind of like follow the musical alphabet as we go up. C6, C sharp or D flat 6, D6, D sharp or E flat 6, E6, F6. So all of those are 6 chords. The cool thing about 6 chords is you can sneak them in place of other chords. For instance, if you've seen how to play an E chord, if you've looked at that chart, You might have said to yourself, "Self, I am not going to play that chord," because it's a tricky one to get to. But we could play E6 in its place, and in a lot of cases, it's going to work out okay. There are other shortcuts to playing the E chord, and we can talk about those another time. But knowing that these 6 chords can work in place of a lot of other chords is really handy. All right, so we learned how to play a bunch of different chords. If I had a bigger ukulele, I could keep going up the neck, and I just have as long as I can play all the strings on the fret, I can play that 6 chord. So assuming that we can reach all 12 frets of our neck, of our ukulele neck, if we can hit all 12 frets like that, then you just learned 12 different chords, all with just one finger, just moving up the neck. That's 12 chords. But what if I told you actually learned 24 chords there? It's true. So the 6th chord, C6, is one name for that chord. But again, you may have noticed if you're looking at a ukulele chart that some of the same chord shapes have more than one name. That's because depending on how we're using them, we could call them different things. For instance, our C6 chord can also be called an A minor 7 chord. C6, A minor 7. They're both the exact same chord, or they're both the exact same notes. Usually it depends on how we place the notes, what pops out of the, what notes pop out of the chord, or where we put that chord within a song is usually going to determine whether we call it a C6 or an A minor 7. But anytime that you see an A minor, you could throw this A minor 7 in there, and that's going to work just fine. A C minor chord, if that shows up in a song somewhere, C minor and E flat 6 are the same chord. I should say C minor 7 and E flat 6 are the same chord. So those are 6 chords and minor 7 chords. Let's go through the minor 7s as we go up. So I've got A minor 7, A sharp minor 7 or B flat minor 7, B minor 7, C minor 7, C sharp minor 7 or D flat minor 7, D minor 7. And again, we can keep working up the musical alphabet and up the neck of the ukulele to get all of those different 7 chords. So there you have it. You just learned 24 chords all in one go. I hope you found it helpful. I hope you can apply it to some of the songs that you might be working on now. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I will see you in the next video.